Well, hello there, and if you listened to the last show or watched it indeed on YouTube, you'll have seen that I picked my favourite 10 artists from the 80s. Well, now it's over to Paul Coates back to pick his favourite 10 artists from the 80s. Paul, a very good day to you. Was it tough deciding on the artists?
It was tough, and we were just discussing before we started recording that over the last few days I've been sat down thinking, actually, do I want to edit one of the artists I've chosen to include another track? So I think I paid reference to the fact that in the late 80s, dance music had started to become really popular with bands like S Express and Bomb and Bass, and there's some of those tracks that I love. Big Masters featuring Betty Bood. That's a great track, Hey DJ. Love that record. Together in Electric Dreams, Giorgio Moroder and Philip Oakey, amazing record. And I didn't include those, but how do you get down to just 10? And as you said in the last show that our list of 10 would change. So if you were to ask us both next week, we'd probably find we've got a completely different 10. But I've chosen the 10. I'm happy with the 10. Most of the singles, most of the tracks featured will be ones that people are familiar with. There's a couple of album tracks in there that people may not be as familiar with, but equally, just like yourself, bit of diversity. Not the band.
No, we're not playing it. No.
But yeah, an eclectic taste. Sort of covering rock music, covering a bit of folk, with one artist, your standard pop, your new wave from the early 80s. And I've decided to do my order in the order of release. So I'm going to start with the first band from 1981. And the first track I've gone with is Stand and Deliver by Adam and the Ants. So, let's be honest. Adam Ant was the lead man. He was Adam and the Ants. For 3 albums, Stuart Leslie Goddard, the guy who would become Adam Ant, would have a successful career. He then went solo, did a number of solo albums, the latest of which is due to be released later on this year, called Bravest of the Brave. Now, this track was the first of 3 UK number ones for Adam Ant, following 2 being Prince Charming and Goody Two Shoes. In 1981, Adam and the Ants were an unstoppable band. So this was the 3rd best-selling single of the year. Prince Charming was the 4th best-selling single of the year. And the second album that they released, Kings of the Wild Frontier, which came out at the end of 1980, was the best-selling album of 1981, beating Queen's Greatest Hits into 2nd place.
Wow.
Now, of course, when you sort of look at it in the fullness of time, Queen's Greatest Hits has gone on to sell far more copies because it is the best-selling album of all time. Yeah. But it did surprise me that it had released. I think it's because it had been released much earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So it actually came out the year before. So the timescales of release it gave it a greater opportunity to have sold copies. So what is it about this track for me that made me include it on this list? Well, when it was released, I was roughly 8 years old. And I have memories of both this track and the Prince Charming track with the characterisations of the Dandy Highwayman and the Prince Charming of the video. I had posters of Adam Ant on my bedroom wall in the early 80s from magazines like Looking. I used to buy that. Smash Hits. What magazines did you get as a child?
Roy the Rovers and Match.
I can see where your son gets his influences from. His son's very football man. So I guess as an 8-year-old, probably that fancy dress sort of style, that was probably what appealed to me as a young child. And also the beat of the rhythm of the drums. There was sort of a couple of guys who were drummers with the band, and that probably influenced me. That was the instrument I wanted to learn to play at school. However, I'm now 6'4", which meant I was the biggest kid in primary school. I ended up with a double bass. But let's hear this track instead.
It's a great track. So track 2, Paul, what have you picked? If we're going chronologically through the 80s, what have you picked?
Yep, so I've just moved up here. So we're now in 1982. And that year, a record was released by the most successful singles band of the decade, who between 1980 to 86 spent 214 weeks in the singles chart. The track we'll shortly play was their 14th top 20 hit since the release of their first single back in 1979. And it came from their 4th studio album, The Rise and Fall of. It was the biggest hit in the US, reaching number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Probably the most famous performance of this track would be for the Queen's Gold Jubilee celebrations in 2012, when it was performed from the roof of Buckingham Palace, whilst 36 projectors portray images
I remember
onto
that.
the palette,
Brilliant.
showing many
Absolutely
different
brilliant.
types of housing across the UK. Throughout the 50 years of Queen's reign to this point, if you haven't guessed, of course, the group was Madness. This song is Our House.
And it's a great song. I mean, it's I mean, obviously 1982 House of Fun year and things like that as well. You how many times have you seen them live?
I've only seen them once live.
Oh,
And
I
it's
thought
been
it
a
was
long
more
time
than
now.
that.
I've only seen them once.
I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, I bought the Fez to go and see them live, which was at Donny Races a few years back.
Yeah.
Myself and my wife went, and astonishing. Fabulous live band. I mean, they've just got so many hits, and that was part of the problem here was, right, so many massive singles, which do I choose? But for me, this is always the one I go back to.
Do you think they'll record any more new material? It's been a few years, hasn't it? Was it, was it Can't
Stop
Can't
Us
Now or something like that? Yeah.
It has been a few years, but they're still performing, the six of them. They're still going out. I think they're doing the racecourse circuit again this summer, because my wife sort of said, "Oh, do you fancy going to see Madness for your birthday again?" We've chosen another band that appears in my top 10 that we're going to go and see as a sort of birthday present, because I like live music. So we opted not for Madness, but I would have thought so. It's the same group intrinsically that reformed back in 1992, so there's no reason why they shouldn't. So who knows? They're still having that cult success. I was trying to recall when I became aware of this track, and I suspect this was probably more from the reissues in the early 90s of tracks like It Must Be Love, which promoted the Divine Madness album. So I got that album. It was probably from listening to that on vinyl constantly that
got you into it.
Got me into this and the band as a whole. And again, it's just the whole, with the last track it was the drums, with this one it's the build-up of the horns, the guitar, the piano before Suggs kicks in to tell that story about family life. Just incidentally, the song also appears in the programme The Young Ones, BBC TV cult hit. So anyone familiar with The Young Ones will know that they always used to have a live band.
Well, controversial you mentioned that, actually, because it's back on iPlayer, right? But when it was repeated on BBC Two, about where the last time we were on BBC Two, they cut a lot of the live artists out. And when it came out on DVD first time, a lot of the
music was cut out.
Like Motown and people like that were cut out. And iPlayer is using the edited versions.
Right.
Now, I don't know why, because like you say, some of the episodes were like 35, 40 minutes long, and they had live acts and things like that. And iPlayer, they're using the 30-minute version. So
if iPlayer's trying to get down to that 30-minute schedule so it can incorporate adverts.
I don't know. I know it's come out on DVD since the first releases, and it's uncut. I have never seen The Young Ones.
I had it on video.
You had it on video? Oh my goodness.
I'm a nurse, and I used to go to work when I was doing night shifts in the 90s, and I would take videos with me because it was pre-DVDs.
Yeah.
And I would sit in somewhere quiet and I would watch a video, which sometimes was things like the Young Ones and Bottom.
Oh, wow. Bottom I've seen endless times. The Young Ones I still haven't seen. Here is Our House by Madness.